What is going on, everybody, and welcome to a special Monday morning edition of the Stokastic NHL Strategy Show, sponsored by Prize Picks. I am your host, Josh Harris. We're here early because DraftKings didn't fuck it up. They actually put the all 6 games on a slate all day. I guess there's nothing else going on today, so they had to do it. We got some nice GPPs on DraftKings today. I didn't look at FanDuel because I don't remember my password, but I do know the FanDuel pricing. Don't worry. Joining me as always, Slim Cliffy, home from his weekend escapades. How you feeling?
Feeling pretty good, actually. Feeling rested for today. Got a good night's sleep in me last night, so I'd be spry for today. I don't know if I'm actually spry. That might take a couple more days, but no, feeling good. I like slates like today because there's a lot you can do with them, right? Where you have games starting all day long, you're not necessarily set to just one lineup. You can kind of adjust it as you go along, depending on what happens and what you need. Like, we're going to talk about the games. There's two, the very first 2 games on the slate at 1 p.m. Eastern are probably the 2 critical games on this slate, right? You should have a pretty good idea of where you stand by 4:00 Eastern, right? So there's a lot that you can do with those final 4 games. You can swap around your lineups. You can just fade the early games and see if you can adjust after that. You can, you can just play a cashy style lineup if you want and fade those early games. Like these slates are nice because there is a lot you can do. I know if you're playing 150 lineups, that might get a little bit tough. You keep crunching all day long. But, if you're single entry, 3 maxing, 5 entry, 10 entry, something like that, there's a lot of different stuff that you can do with your lineups to not only get unique, but to just kind of play along with the slate as the day goes on, because there are, 2 games at 1:00 Eastern. There's 2 games at 4:00 Eastern. I think 2 games at 7:00 Eastern, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe one of those late games a little bit later. But either way, you could kind of play along with the slate all day long. And that's why I really dig days like today. And I'm thankful DraftKings included those early games.
Yeah, and I see Tokyo Swan in the chat says, I've got a phobia playing early NHL games. I have that phobia too. Here's the problem. The 2 home teams in the 1:00 game, Boston Bruins have a 4 total. Florida Panthers have a 4.4 total.
Yeah, that is the problem. Those are the 2 highest totals on the slate, and it's not even really close. Like, the next closest to Boston is a half goal behind. Like, those 2, Florida and Boston are way out in front in the implied goal total race. So yeah, those are really 2 crucial games. And like I said, you should kind of have an idea of where you stand by, 3:30 Eastern or whatever it is. And it should be pretty interesting to see what happens in those games. I can't wait to talk about them.
Yeah, it's just like, if you're fading those early games, buckle your seatbelt because that could be a bumpy ride. I see a whole bunch of you in here early. Thank you. Make sure to smash that like button while you're here. We also have a nice deal where you can get 50% off a weekly or monthly subscription. No, I mean, it doesn't include any non-FC subscription. You can always add it on after. But yeah, 50% off, great deal. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I see Stokastic projections for NHL doesn't seem to update after lock when it was ruled out. I think the best thing for that is if you aren't getting updates in the projections, be in the Discord, because when we rule someone out, a lot of people always ask, what's the best strategy to, do I swap to this guy? Do I swap to that guy? Get in the Discord, ask the question. There's always someone who will answer that for you. Make sure to smash that like button. We're also sponsored by PrizePicks. So have a nice deal for them in a little bit. Josh looks like EMAC coming in hot. Josh, looks like it was a tiresome weekend. Cliffy looks all refreshed and relaxed from his car ride and a trip to the salon. That's my secret. I'm always tired. Cliffy always looks good. Me, I need a haircut with the 7 hairs on the top of my head. I think that might be the problem. But yeah, let's get into the slate, shall we? 6 games. First game of the night, first game of the day, I should say. Ottawa Senators with a 2.4 total heading into Boston. The Bruins have a 4 total. Kevin Mandolese, Jeremy Swayman are probable. Looks like Jake DeBrusk is going to be back today on the top line with Marchand and Bergeron, which slides Pasternak down on the second line with Pavel Zacha and David Krejci. Senators played yesterday. They beat the Blues 7-1. The Blues are just bad now. They traded a couple of their guys. They got no depth. Goalies are awful. But going back to back on the road into Boston is one of the worst matchups you can have. The Bergeron line is going to absolutely shut down. The Stützle, Tkachuk, Giroux line don't have too much interest in them. If you happen to get there in 150, have like 1 or 2 Ottawa ones, I think that's fine. I think, this is a Boston game. There's not much ownership here compared to the Florida Panthers, and this is a 4 total. So if you are looking to fade the Florida Panthers chalk, I think the Boston Bruins is a nice pivot.
Yeah, it is for sure. I think the problem. First, I get that this is a schedule loss for Ottawa. Like, there are times where you just look at a schedule and a team should lose a game. Back-to-back on the road, early afternoon start on a Monday going into Boston is a schedule loss for the Ottawa Senators. By the same token, they've as somebody in our Discord pointed out this morning, they beat Boston twice already this year, and they beat Boston once last year. Like, it's kind of like that Montreal-Toronto thing we talked about on Saturday, even though, Toronto ended up winning 5-1. I don't think that was a huge surprise. It seems like Ottawa is just always seems to get up for games against Boston. Now it's one of those things like, Boston's been at the top of the conference for, 10 years now. So it's kind of like one of those measuring stick games, but I could see Ottawa kind of getting up for this, but it is just such a brutal matchup. Like, if this was like one of 28 other teams, I would be pretty interested in playing the Ottawa Senators because, there's not going to be much ownership on them here. Just going by our top stacks tool, top 2 lines are going to be combined under 1% owned. So, there's not going to be a whole lot of ownership here. In a better matchup, there'd be a little bit more, but I still don't think there'd be that many people would be avoiding Ottawa. It's just, can you full stack a 20K, 19.9K, 20K top line going into Boston up against the Bergeron Marchand shutdown line, right? It's just not something that I'd be interested in. If you want to one-off some players, I think that's certainly fine for the Ottawa side. You can one-off Stützle, you can one-off Tkachuk, you can one-off Batherson or something like that. I just don't know if I would full 3-man forward stack any Ottawa line. Like, that Boston top line they have struggled to score at times this year. It's something you and I have brought up a lot. Shooting percentage problems, still 1.9 expected goals against, 1.5 actual goals against with Jake DeBrusk on that top line this season. They just shut down everybody. So, yeah, if you want to one-off like a Tkachuk or a Stützle, I think that's fine. Like, Tkachuk still, his projection isn't high for for his price, because he is $7,500. That is a hefty price, but he's still a top 10 winger by overall projections on this slate. So bad value, but it's not like there's nothing expected from him. So yes, one-offs I think are fine. I just don't know if I would get to full stacking Ottawa. The question is what to do with the Boston side, because you're right. I don't think there's going to be anywhere near as much ownership on them, on them as there is on Florida. Anaheim and Ottawa just aren't really terrible teams. I do think maybe they come up a little bit because they're not super expensive, like maybe around 15% in some single entry contests or something like that. And maybe even higher, because maybe people will be worried about, line combinations later in the slate, because you don't want to necessarily have to scramble if, a player changes lines or a player gets injured. Like, we won't know because there aren't morning skates for a lot of these teams. So maybe the ownership does come in a little bit high, but there are just a number of ways to stack the Boston Bruins, right? That's the nice thing about using them. You can just stack the top line if you want, because they're perfectly correlated on the power play. You can just stack the second line if you want, because they have been so dominant offensively this year, even if their shooting percentage is riding high. Like that second line of Krejci, Zacha, Pasternak, shooting almost 15% this season. That's high. Like 10% would be a good number for them. Anything above 11%. Like, you're really starting to worry about regression. So that's going to come down. But they're still good offensively. You can power play stack, right? You can just, add Pasternak to the top line and go with 4 forwards. You can, and then add McAvoy. You can onslaught stack, Josh stack, use 6 Boston skaters in a lineup. There are just so many ways you can use Boston, especially because, as somebody in our Discord pointed out this morning, there are ice time issues with this team, right? I think I was looking this morning, 4 out of 13 of Bergeron's most recent games, he's played around 14 minutes or less. Like, do you want to pay up for Bergeron and have him play 15 minutes? Now, the thing about that is if he's played 14 minutes here in this game, 2 things have happened. He either got injured or they blew out Ottawa. And if they're blowing out Ottawa, there's a good chance he's involved, right? So, yes, there are ice time issues in a nutshell, but I'm not overly concerned about them, because if he's not getting ice time, it's because they're blowing out the Sens or he's hurt. Like, that's just basically it. So, I get those problems. I don't think they're as important as we might think, just because of the situation that would dictate their ice time, not necessarily just we're only going to play Bergeron 14 minutes no matter what. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. I would definitely just stack Boston 1, perfectly correlated top line. Maybe they come in around 15%. It doesn't really matter to me. But I think there are just so many interesting Boston here that that's to get away from a much chalkier Florida side.
Yeah. I mean, David Pasternak's currently projected at 13% in the Stokastic projections. I mean, like 13% David Pastrnak. I know he's expensive, but Matty Tkachuk, $1,100 cheaper, almost triple the ownership. So I don't know. David Pastrnak could be an interesting one-off as well in a 4 total. I think you can pair him with Zacha or Krejci, whatever you want to do. Like, you could power play stack the Bruins if you wanted to. I mean, their power play hasn't been great, but like, there's plenty of ways to get in Boston. Like, yeah, full stacking as well. Like, I always don't mind full stacking the top line because they're fully correlated, but leaving off Pastrnak out of a Boston stack feels kind of bad. Kind of like how you stack the Oilers without McDavid feels kind of bad, but you can just, full stack Boston 1, add in Pastrnak. There's plenty of ways to get creative with Boston here. I just don't know on the Sens, like 2.4 road total, early game. Yeah, probably just, one-offs or just full out fade. Like, I'm playing one lineup today. They're not going to be in my lineup, but if you're getting to 20 to 150, you can have a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with that. Like, I'm not going to have an Ottawa stack. Maybe I have a one-off forward or, a cheap defenseman or something, but I'm not going to be stacking the Sens.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next one. Anaheim Ducks with a 2.5 total. Heading into Florida, the Panthers have a 4.4 total. John Gibson probable. Sergei Bobrovsky is confirmed. Sam Bennett is still out. Bowness, no, not Bowness, whatever his name is. Paul Maurice, excuse me, said no lineup changes. I don't know if that means Barkov, Tkachuk, Verhaeghe, because they went to that line in the last game. That's something you're going to need to see in warmups.
Yeah, no lineup changes to me just indicates they're not expecting Bennett or Duclair back, not necessarily that they're going to use the same line combinations, right?
Yeah. So you have to wait and see if it is Verhaeghe, Barkov, Tkachuk. That line is, really, really good. They're just getting so much ownership. It's just going to be quite look, the projection on Verhaeghe, Barkov, Tkachuk right now is 50.4 on DraftKings. That's like Edmonton 1-esque, and they're cheaper. Excuse me, my voice is, I don't know. My voice is Monday morning. You look down that second line, Reinhart and power play 135%. You know what I mean? So, I don't even know. There's probably ways to get different. I think one of them is maybe, just full power play stack and getting both those defensemen in there. But, if you're stacking Florida here, you're just going to have to be aware. You're going to have to get a little bit different here. And then on the flip side, we had no interest really in the Sens because it's a tough matchup. Florida is a big favorite here, but they are pretty high event. They aren't the best team defensively. Now, the Barkov-Tkachuk line with Verhaeghe, just insane numbers. If they get, the Strome, Zegras, Grant matchup, I don't have too much interest there. So maybe I'm looking at a Henrique McTavish 2-man here. They're not getting too much ownership. I don't mind taking pieces of the Ducks here compared to the Senators. I'd much rather play the Ducks.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, there might be some slightly over-owned Ducks players, but that's not really a huge concern for me on a slate of this size. And it's worth pointing out Anaheim does have a higher implied total than Ottawa, the same implied total as Philly, and 0.1 less than Winnipeg. So, it's not like they're the bottom of the barrel for road teams here today. It's just how bad they are defensively probably going to lead to a few goals against here for them. Yes, we just have to watch for what the lineups are going to be at warmups, because if they do use Barkov, Verhaeghe, Tkachuk, it seems pretty reasonable to say you're going to see super heavy ownership on that specific trio, right? Because you're going to get at least two out of three on the top power play unit. They do have incredible numbers together this year at as you were mentioning, Verhaeghe, Barkov, Tkachuk are up to 175 minutes at 5-on-5 this year. 4.9 expected goals for per 60 minutes. I think that's 90% higher than the league average. 4.8 actual goals per 60 minutes. Again, that's about 90% higher than the league average. They are just absolutely running over the competition. That's why the projection is so high for them in this matchup, along with who they're facing. So obviously it would be an excellent line if they're together. Now, if Luosterainen is there, what we talked about on the last show was when Luosterainen was playing with Tkachuk, is Luosterainen and Tkachuk have been pretty good together this season. Luosterainen is not really a great offensive player, but he's pretty good defensively. And I think he's good at creating turnovers to get the puck going the other way pretty quickly. And, those rush shots and rush chances really, really help. So I wouldn't even mind playing Luosterainen and Tkachuk and Verhaeghe if they're together. Luosterainen and Tkachuk, 4.2 expected goals for so far this season, but 7 actual goals for, because they're shooting, over 15%, but you even cut that in half and they're still well above league average at scoring. They're just generating so much on the ice, whether it's Barkov or whether it's Luosterainen. So, we'll just have to see what it looks like at warmups. But again, I think Florida is another team like Boston where you can do a lot of different things with the line combinations, right? Because, even if Barkov, Verhaeghe, and Tkachuk are together on the same line, at best, you're probably going to get 2 players on that line on the top power play unit. Verhaeghe has been there on and off basically over the last month. He certainly has seen some time on the top power play unit. I was just looking through their last game against Nashville, and he was taken off again for Brandon Montour, but you could get them perfectly correlated. Verhaeghe's just having a great season, on his own. Like he's on pace for over 40 goals. He's getting some power play time, which is helping. Obviously Tkachuk is doing what Tkachuk is doing. Like, it would just be a great line combination. Now, if Barkov is with Lundell and Reinhart, that does change things for me, because as you and I have talked about on the show, that line's just not very good offensively. 2.2 expected goals for, 1.8 actual goals for per 60 minutes, and 165 minutes together. That's not really a small sample. I think that's like 15 games worth of ice time, 15 full games. Reinhart has been shooting quite a bit lately. He has 42 shots in his last 10 games. But the trade-off for that is that Alexander Barkov is not shooting a lot. He has 15 shots in his last five games, and I think he only has like 10 in his last 4 or something like that. So like, he's not shooting. So like, that's the trade-off here. And if they are together, you're still going to get 2 out of 3 on the top power play, with Barkov and Reinhart. And they're going to be cheaper, and they're going to be wildly owned, right? If it is Barkov, Reinhart, and Lundell, the current projection is over 40% on DraftKings. I don't know if it's Barkov, Reinhart, Lundell. I don't know if I could play that line at that ownership. I don't care what the matchup is, right? It's just too much. It would be a case where I would start taking off or adding players to the stack. Make it a power play stack by taking out Lundell and putting in Tkachuk, right? Make it, a full power play stack by adding in Tkachuk and going double defenseman. Use Montour Ekblad as a double defenseman, not use any Florida forwards. I think if I'm playing the Florida Panthers here today and Barkov is with Lundell and Reinhart, the one thing I'm not doing is just slamming in Lundell, Barkov, Reinhart, and that's it, right? I'm adding a defenseman. I'm adding Tkachuk. I'm going double defenseman. I'm doing something else to that lineup than just playing a 40% owned line. We'll have to see what warm-ups start. I would really, really like to see Barkov between Verhaeghe and Tkachuk. I think that would start concentrating the ownership even more. But at that point, you could get a little funky with your stacks. You could take off Verhaeghe and put in Reinhart, go full power play. Again, you can go double defenseman. So we'll just have to see when warm-ups start. But all I'll say is that Verhaeghe and Barkov are the wingers that you probably want to use. Verhaeghe and Barkov. Verhaeghe and Tkachuk. And whether it's Barkov or Luosterainen, I would be interested in playing either. It wouldn't really matter. I do think there is merit to fading Florida here, just flat out fading them. Obviously, 6-game slate, 41% top line ownership, 23% second line ownership. Throw in some power plays, some Josh stacks, some broken stacks, whatever. You might see 7 out of 10 lineups have some sort of Florida stack in them, anywhere between like 50 and 70%. That's just such heavy ownership. I think there is merit to fading Florida and just playing Boston, but it could end your day pretty quickly. Like, you could just be, your day could be over by the middle of the afternoon. That's the risk you run if you do fade them, but I think there is merit to it. On the Anaheim side, I agree with you. I think there is some stuff to like on that Anaheim side. Grant and Strome, for as bad as they are defensively, every Anaheim line is bad defensively. They have been good offensively. 3.3 expected goals for, 2.9 actual goals for per 60 minutes this season. Grant isn't a bad offensive player. He does put himself in good scoring chance positions. He's just really, really bad defensively, as is Ryan Strome. It gets them pinned in their own zone a fair bit. And if it is Barkov or Verhaeghe, Tkachuk, that's going to be their matchup, and they're probably going to spend a lot of time in their zone. That's the problem. But I do like a 2-man of Zegras and Grant, Strome and Grant, something like that. I do like that Florida side. I'm not sure I would, or Anaheim. I'm not sure I would go down to the Anaheim second line. Like, Max Jones and Mason McTavish just have not played well together this year. 2 expected goals per 60 minutes and over 200 minutes together. I don't think Adam Henrique is going to be the key to unlocking their offensive upside beyond being 20% worse than league average. So 25% worse. So for me, it's Grant and Zegras and Strome, probably some two-man combination out of that. That's where I'm looking on the Anaheim side.
Yeah. On the Florida side, like depending, like how you mentioned, if Barkov is in between Reinhart and Lundell, I'm just going to whatever line Tkachuk is on, basically, and then working around that. Tkachuk's their best offensive player. It's not particularly close. He's the straw that stirs the drink for the Panthers. Like if it is E2 Luosterainen in between Verhaeghe and Tkachuk, you can full stack that line. You can power play stack. You could do all sorts of things. I would also be looking to fade straight up stacking Barkov, Reinhart, Lundell. There's plenty of ways you can do that, though. You could Barkov, Reinhart, Tkachuk, Barkov, Reinhart. You know, Ekblad, Montour, like you mentioned, it's just we have to wait and see on the lines here. I think maybe, hopefully, that keeps the ownership down a little bit. Like Cliffy said, you could just full out fade Florida, buckle your seatbelt. If they go nuts, your day's done. You can enter the Pittsburgh Islander showdown. There's 10K to first in that one. So your day would not be totally lost. You can enter some showdown. You can do that anyway. But there is some merit to fading that high of ownership and just hope they bust. But Anaheim Ducks might be the worst defensive team in the NHL. So could be a very rocky ride if you do, fade. But there is merit. Like Cliffy said, you could see 7 of 10 lineups have some sort of Florida. Yay. Now we can get to talk about the Flyers, with Nick Delorier up on the top line with Travis Konechny. Philadelphia Flyers with a 2.5 total heading into Calgary. The Flames have a 3.5 total. Carter Hart, Jacob Markstrom probable. Not much ownership here on the Flames. This is a good 5-on-5 matchup, not the best power play matchup. The Flames split power play units anyway, so I'm not sure you go out and power play stack the Flames here anyway since they split power play. Looks like Elias Lindholm is going to be back in the lineup in between Toffoli and Dubé. Again, I think, there's 3 playable lines here on the Flames. I think my least favorite would be that Lindholm Toffoli Dubé line. I think with 5-on-5 being the primary way to attack them here, I think Backlund, Coleman, Mangiapane would be my favorite. And then I'd go Kadri, Huberdeau, Peltier. I think, Huberdeau is starting to shoot the puck a little bit more. He still hasn't had a great season, but his price is very cheap. So I don't mind either of the Kadri or Backlund lines here. On the Flyers here, if it is Markstrom's had an awful season. Not that Vladar has had a great season, but the Flames are really good defensively. They just have had bad goaltending. There's absolutely no ownership on the Flyers here. I don't think I'd full stack anything, but don't mind a 1-off or 2-man from the Flyers here.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start with the Flyers side. You brought up Nick Delorier playing with Travis Konechny. They started the game together this year, but as every Flyers game seems to have done for about the last 2 months, line combinations just exploded in the second half of the game, and guys were playing all over the place. My best guess is that I think we see some sort of Konechny, Van Riemsdyk, Frost line, and then Tippett, Lawton, Hayes. That's just a guess. Like I said, they completely blew up their lines last game. They're on the road, so I haven't seen practices from them, obviously. This is a 4 Eastern start, but it's in Calgary, so I think that's a 2:00 start. You're not local time. You're not going to get line combinations until warm-up. So it's saying exactly what to play on the Flyers side when you don't know where anybody's really playing is kind of tough. But one thing I will say is that Tippett and Lawton have played pretty well together this year. I think Scott Lawton's one of the more underrated players in the NHL. He's been pretty good. Good defensively for a few years now, and I think he's starting to add an offensive game dimension to his games, rather. Tippett and Lawton on the ice this season for the Flyers, 140 minutes together, 3.1 expected goals for. Problem is they're shooting 6%, just over 6%. Like if they're shooting, 10% or something like that, they'd be well above league average in scoring. So hopefully we can see some positive regression there. If they play together, I do have interest. I also have interest in Konechny and Van Riemsdyk if they do play together. Now, Konechny, Van Riemsdyk, and Frost is a line I'm assuming. I'm a little bit worried about that line because Morgan Frost isn't really having that great of a season. I was looking at some different data this morning, and his scoring chance assists at 5-on-5, which is just how often he assists on a teammate's scoring chance offensively, is worse on the Flyers, like worse than Nick Delorier, whom we were just making fun of for his offensive inability in the NHL, let's call it. So I'm not sure Frost will really help that line. And if they do leave Konechny with Delorier, like at least Delorier's good defensively. Like he is a black hole offensively, but at least he's good defensively. So he brings something to that line. Frost and Konechny would ostensibly be on the same power play unit together. Their power plays are like their lines. They change up basically every single game. So I would have a little bit of interest in like a Konechny, Van Riemsdyk 2-man, but I think that's the line that would see the Backlund, Mangiapane, Coleman line, and I don't want any part of that matchup. So it would be Tippett, Lawton, and Hayes I would go to if that's what the line is. We do have that line together in our top stacks tool, 2.4% top two probability, 1.2% ownership. So there is positive leverage here. They're coming in much lower owned than other lines in that range, especially the Islanders I will talk to in a little bit. I think the Rangers are going to come in much higher owned. Pittsburgh, I think, is going to come in much higher owned as well. So there is some merit to using like a Hayes, Tippett, Lawton, some 2-man out of that, I think, especially where they're going to avoid the Coleman line. On the Calgary side, oh, God, like you said, there are 3 playable lines here. I think I would go with the Backlund, Coleman, Mangiapane line. Now, I know they might come in with the most ownership because I think they are their best line at 5-on-5. But the main reason is that it's not a good power play matchup for the Flames. The Flyers are at 2.8 times shorthanded per game this season. It's well below the league average. That's over 10% lower than the league average. The penalty kill, we talked about it Saturday, and it continues. It has been really, really good for months now, like basically going back to the middle of November. We're going on 3 months of a really, really good Flyers penalty kill. And, the Flames have kind of split up their power play units. And guys on the third line are actually getting power play time now. I think Backlund's on one unit, Mangiapane's on the other. They're not correlated. At least they're getting some power play time. But, the split power play time hurts the guys further up the lineup. It doesn't help them necessarily, right? But it could help the third line a little bit. So it is Backlund, Coleman, Mangiapane, especially just, how lights out they really have been this season. 4.3 expected goals for over the last month. 5.6 actual goals for. Backlund has 30 shots in his last 10 games. Coleman has 29. Mangiapane's on the quote top power play unit now. There are a lot of reasons to play him. They might be the highest owned Calgary line, but I also think it's the best line. And at a certain point, I just want to play the best line that a team has, and that's this one. So Calgary 3 for me. But like you said, I think every Calgary line is in play. I just think this is a spot where the power play means less than it normally does. For that reason, the 5-on-5 play means more. And for that reason, I would go with Calgary 3.
Agreed there. As we mentioned off the top, we are sponsored by PrizePicks, and you can get 1 free month Stokastic Plus Platinum and up to $100 deposit match bonus with PrizePicks when you sign up and make a deposit. Make sure to click that link in the description if you're interested in PrizePicks' daily prop-based contest. No sharks, optimizers, and mass entries. If you're interested in some NHL PrizePicks, our boss at Jake Hari on Twitter has a 6-pack of picks up there. I was looking through PrizePicks today. 2 of them that Jake has as well stood out to me, and I'll give you another one as well. Artemi Panarin, more than half an assist, which means he'll register an assist today. Also, David Pastrnak, more than half a goal. It's always a good bet to bet on David Pastrnak scoring. The other one that I like that Jake does not have on his picks on his Twitter is Jacob Truba over 2.5 blocks. So if you're interested in playing some NHL prize picks, check out at Jake Hari. He loves your interaction. Go tell him that he's a fish. Or if you like him, like the picks, just tell him. He has a 6-pack of picks up for $25. You can win $625 if they all cash. Make sure to click that link in the description, get your 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum and your $100 deposit match bonus. So make sure to check that out. Let's move on to the next game. We have the Seattle Kraken with a 3.5 total heading into San Jose. The Sharks have a 3 total. Senor Fiesta, Martin Jones is probable. James Reimer is confirmed. Timo got banged up in the last game. I have not seen an update on him. Have you seen one at all?
No.
Yeah, so like I don't know if Quinn's going to talk. I don't know an update here. They may hold him out for, precautionary trade reasons. I don't know. I don't like Sharks. That line, I would be interested. Hertel Meyer. It's just like Seattle's a good defensive team. The goalies just suck. Like Martin Jones has a really good winning record, but his numbers are just terrible. So I have to wait and see on if Meyer's in. They're not getting much ownership here, so I think there'd be a very sneaky contrarian option here tonight. It's just a question of can you wait until 3:30 with your lineup to get them in? On the flip side, I do have some interest in the Seattle side. Like I think the Yanni Gord, Bjorkstrand, Tolvanen line is going to be the more popular. But I also don't mind going to the Beniers, McCann, Eberle line. I think, from power play correlation, Bjorkstrand, Tolvanen's on the same unit, and then Eberle and Beniers are on the same unit. So you get 2 out of 3 on the power play. Not that Seattle's power play is anything special. They're pretty bad. So I think, I just full on stack either the Beniers or the Bjorkstrand line.
Yeah, the Seattle power play's got some serious Montreal power play vibes to it. It's not pretty. Before I break down this game, I just want to mention again with the prize picks. If you do a Stokastic membership, there's a player prop shot on goal and goal tool that you can use. It shows the prop odds, the projection that we have for certain players, expected win percentage, expected ROI, etc. So you can, Kyle Palmieri has the highest expected ROI for his shot prop today. And, that kind of information is available every day. Jake and Alex update throughout the day. So there are tools here that you can use specifically for prize picks. So just one other way that we can help people make a little bit of money here, hopefully. Just saw literally posted like 5 minutes ago from Curtis Pashelka from the Sharks, one of their beat writers. The Sharks called up a forward and a defenseman this morning.
That's not.
They said LeBanc and Meyer were questionable, and we'll find out later. That says to me that at least one guy is questionable and one guy is out, if not both out. And there's a pretty good chance that they run 11-7. That would be kind of a mess. And, Meyer and LeBanc being out takes 2/3 of the top line away. So you have no idea what they would do with their lines. Do they put Bonino and Sturm with Hertel or something like that, right? Like, it's not going to be pretty. We'll have to see what it looks like. I'm going to assume for now that Meyer and LeBanc are not playing. That would be why San Jose would have made those call-ups. So Meyer and LeBanc are out. I don't know how much interest I really have in San Jose. Because here's the problem. San Jose's second line, Couture, Esamont, and Barabanov. 2 out of 3 guys would be on the top power play unit. That's nice. Seattle's penalty kill has generally not been good this year. It's gotten a little bit better of late, but still middle of the league, like nothing really exciting. But Meyer's just such a big part of that offense, at all strengths. It's kind of like what we talked about with Troy Terry when he went down for Anaheim. It's like you don't really want to, stack a whole lot unless he's in the lineup. I don't want to, kind of belabor the point about how important Timo Meier is, but I'll just talk about at 5-on-5. If you look at players across the league at 5-on-5 over the last 2 seasons, Timo Meier is seventh amongst all forwards in expected goals for impact for his team. The guys above him are like Jason Robertson, Matt Tkachuk, Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, right? Like that's how important Meier is to this team offensively. And I think they could struggle to generate when he's not there. And it's not just expected goals impact, like his actual goals impact over that span. It's like top 40 in the league or something like that. If I'm remembering correctly, like in the neighborhood of like Brady Tkachuk, Sidney Crosby. Like that's the kind of level of impact we're talking about if Meier is out. I just don't have much interest. Thanks for playing the music earlier. If it is Senior Fiesta in net, even if it's Grubauer, it doesn't really matter. Yes, the Seattle goaltending can completely let them down on any given day, and that would be a reason to play San Jose. And the Sharks probably come in with very little ownership, whatever the line combinations are, because the line combinations aren't going to be known until warmups. But when you take such a big engine off the team, it's kind of like, unless Erik Karlsson can really, really, really have a monster game, it seems like they're really going to struggle to generate offense, and it just doesn't get me excited. So like, if I'm assuming Meier's out, and if Meier is out, like a one-off, like Esamont, I think is fine. Esamont's been shooting quite a bit lately. He's over 3 shots per game since he got to San Jose. I don't think that's a lot. Over 3 shots per game in a 14-game span. It's pretty good. So yeah, one off there, something like that. I think that's fine. But with Meier out, and even with LeBanc out, I don't think I'll be full stacking the Sharks. It's what to do with San Jose, or with Seattle, sorry, because they're like Calgary. They do have 3 playable lines, right? And you're seeing relatively even ownership across them, 3.5% to 7.5% between the 3 lines. Seattle's been pretty good defensively as well, which is another thing that worries me about playing San Jose. Like I was looking over their last 20 games, their expected goals against is like 6th in the league, like just behind teams like Boston and Vegas. So where they're playing so well defensively, Meier's out. Like it seems like San Jose is like a pretty easy pass. So with Seattle, I would probably just go to the Beniers, Eberle, and McCann line, like you said. They're going to get that Couture matchup. The Couture matchup, they've been generating a lot of offense, but they've been well below average defensively by both expected goals and actual goals against a 5-on-5. San Jose penalty kill, still good, but not elite or anything like that over their last 20 games. Maybe the Seattle power play can scrape up a goal, in that span. But that's Seattle top line of Beniers and Eberle. Really been dominant, 2.8 expected goals for, 1.7 against in their last 60 minutes together. So that's where I would go on the Seattle side. But I agree with you. I think there are 3 playable lines. The one I don't think I would play is Schwartz, Wenberg, and Tanev. It's playing Brandon Tanev, an over-owned Brandon Tanev. Like this is one of the most over-leveraged lines that we have on the slate here tonight, the second most over-leveraged line. So it would be the Gord line or it would be the Beniers line, but it's the Beniers line that I'm leaning to in this one. I just like that matchup against Couture.
Yeah, and they're coming in lower owned than Gord, Bjorkstrand, Tolvanen. You can play that line. They have very similar projections. If you have a preference, you can play them. I prefer the Beniers line as well, but I know a lot of people who love the Gord, Bjorkstrand, Tolvanen line, myself included. I just want to get lower ownership in this matchup with a similar projection. Let's move on to the next one. This game could be a debacle here. The Winnipeg Jets with a 2.6 total heading into New York. The Rangers have a 3.3 total. Winnipeg played last night with Hellebuck. They lost to the Devils 4-2, so it's probably going to be Dave Rittich in that.
I want to jump in there real quick. Hellebuck only saw 28 shots last night, and I think it was Murat Ates asked Rick Bowness if he was tempted to start Hellebuck back-to-back because Riddick had to play a few games in a row there while Hellebuck was sick. And he said something to the effect of like, no comment, or we'll see, or you'll find out, or something like that. I don't know, man. Like, it seems like Winnipeg lost yesterday. Sorry. They've lost 2 games in a row. I think they've lost something like, 5 of their last 7 or 5 of their last 8. Like, I could really see them going back to Hellebuck here tonight.
It's certainly possible.
Yeah,
So
I just want to mention that because I remember a beat writer specifically asking about these 2 games and whether Hellebuck could start both, and Bonus seemed to kind of indicate that, yeah, it's at least possible.
Yeah. Rick Bowness, also a Class A clown, so it could be just coach speak. Rangers, Igor Shesterkin is confirmed. Rangers back home after a long West Coast road trip. This is 3-4 and 4-6 for them. Rangers going with Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, and Jimmy Vesey, Panarin, Trocheck, and Tarasenko, and then the kids. I like these line combinations better than with Tarasenko up with Zibanejad and Kreider. Zibanejad, Kreider, and Tarasenko are playing to such a low pace. Zibanejad and Kreider and Vesey have very good numbers together. Tarasenko and Panarin playing together makes sense. Panarin seems to love playing with Tarasenko. They're good buddies. I just don't know how much I'm going to have in this game. It's just like it worries me. Always the first game back after a long road trip is always a letdown spot. This is also 3-4, 4-6. That being said, Winnipeg is back-to-back on the road. We haven't had an update on Nikolai Ehlers either, who left the game with a head injury, a suspected head injury. The lines the Jets ran last night were absolutely awful. If anything, I like the Rangers side just based off the fact that they're home and they have a higher total. I just don't know how much I'm going to get to this game in my 1 to 3 lineups.
Yeah, this is a tough game, especially because of Nick Ehlers. It doesn't look like Ehlers is going to play tonight. They think it might be a concussion. Obviously, if they even suspect it's a concussion, he's not playing back-to-back games after leaving. You know what I mean? So if he's out, who knows what those Winnipeg lines are going to look like? Like, they were such a disaster, even with Ehlers in the lineup. Like, they were trying to basically run 3 scoring lines, and that put Adam Lowry on the top line, Mason Appleton on the second line, Saku Menelainen playing with Kyle Connor. Like,
that line is absolutely caved last night too.
Color me shocked that Winnipeg's worst forward didn't help Pierre-Luc Dubois and Kyle Connor. So what those lines look like, we just don't know, and I doubt we'll know until warmups. That's a problem for Winnipeg. Scheifele and Perfidi, who they end up playing with, like, they started, they played with Mason Appleton for almost the entire game last game. They have been playing with Blake Wheeler a little bit, but I looked at Scheifele and Perfidi's numbers without the 3 wingers, without Wheeler, without Ehlers, without Connor. Not good, man. 1.9 expected goals for, 2.1 expected goals against. Now they're actually scoring at a good clip, 3.8 actual goals, but it's because they're shooting almost 15%. If you go down to 10%, which would still be well above league average, all of a sudden that line is scoring like 2.6 goals, which is about league average. So I'm worried about some cool down from that. If they're still playing with Mason Appleton, which we don't know. So at the very least, I think I'm out on the Scheifele Perfidi line. God, that brings me to Kyle Connor playing with Saku Menelainen. I don't get it. Like, Menelainen is just one of those players. I don't even know why he's like getting regular minutes, let alone playing with what is possibly their top power play unit. Menelainen so far this season has played about 380 minutes at even strength. His expected goals impact amongst the Jets forwards is the absolute worst, and it's not even close. And if you look across the league, he's basically I think 7th percentile impact. Like, terrible. You said it. They got ran over last night. I think they're going to get run over here again tonight, because Trocheck and Panarin typically have been a good line this season. Trocheck and Panarin, 120 minutes since Christmas, 2.6 expected goals for, 2.8 against. Not great strict expected goals numbers, but Zibanejad and Panarin typically don't have super elite expected goals numbers. Those are guys that thrive on shooting percentages. But then, you mix that with, not great defensive numbers, but they're not awful. And then Igor Shesterkin behind that. Do I want to play Kyle Connor skating alongside Saku Menelainen? Absolutely not. So I think I'm just out on Winnipeg. I think I would treat them like I would treat Ottawa here today. And I mean that because there's no stack that I want to use because I don't think the line combinations that we have are good. And if they make new line combinations, we're not going to get them until 6:30 Eastern or whatever. And there's only 2 games left on the slate by that point. So it would be, I guess a one-off Kyle Connor. I think a one-off Scheifele, does make sense. He's probably going to have to play heavy minutes. Something like that. I just don't know if there's a 3-man forward unit I'm stacking from Winnipeg. On the Rangers side, something I brought up on Saturday's show was Zibanejad and Tarasenko not really generating a lot. With those 2 guys on the ice, they were at 30 shot attempts per 60 minutes, which is like half of what you would want to see from a line. Now, they got broken up, but what I wanted to mention was when it was the Rangers' recent schedule. The 5 games that Tarasenko have played at home versus Seattle, and I just talked about how good they've been defensively lately, at Carolina, at Vancouver, at Edmonton, at Calgary. 4 of those 5 teams have been amongst the 6 best defensive teams in the league since Christmas. So they were brutal matchups for the Rangers almost across the board other than Vancouver. So I wouldn't take a whole lot away from what Tarasenko has done in the 5 games so far. I would just keep paying attention to what they do coming up because, the schedule does get a little bit easier. Detroit next, then Washington, then Los Angeles, then Philly, then Ottawa. So after the next 5 games, I think we should have a better idea. But Trocheck and Panarin have played well together this year. As I said, Tarasenko got moved up to the top power play unit in Trocheck's spot. So you still get 2 out of 3 guys on the top power play unit. It's just not a good power play spot. Winnipeg's penalty kill has been pretty good all season. Plus, Hellebuck might start again. Plus, they don't take a lot of penalties. Plus, the Rangers might split power play time a little bit if they do keep swapping power play players. So I think I would just go to Rangers 2. But I think the Rangers do, kind of like some other teams here, do have 3 playable lines here tonight. Which is nice because that should help spread out ownership. But I think overall, I'm kind of with you. I'm not super stoked to stack any line on either side here.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, we get to warm-ups and Pierre-Luc Dubois playing with Kyle Connor and Blake Wheeler or something. I don't know. There just isn't a line combination if Ehlers is out that I'm super interested in. Although maybe if Dubois and Connor are playing with Perfidi or they're playing with Wheeler, maybe I have some interest there, but I don't know. It's a big question mark. So we'll have to wait and see. We have 330 of you in the chat. Thank you very much. Make sure to smash that like button if you haven't already. And we have a special deal for exclusively for the listeners of this show. The only way to get it is if you click the link in the description. You can get 50% off a weekly or monthly NHL package. Once you click on the link, it will generate the code that you need necessary. There's no code you have to enter. You just click the link. It will auto-populate. And you'll get a 50% off weekly, which is under $10 now. The normal price is $20. And the monthly is under $30. The normal price there is $60. You get access to all the tools that we have, projections, ownership, top stacks, rankings, and you get the most important part for my personal belief is the Discord. The Discord is unbelievable. It's a very nice community. You also get, alerts when there's players out. You get, a bunch of sharp minds, a lot of people willing to help you besides Cliffy, myself, and Jake. There's tons of people in there willing to help you. This is the lineup builder up on the screen, which Cliffy has a lineup kind of built already. So the lineup builder, if you are a premium member, you get the line combinations, you get the ownership projections, you get the line projections, you get the power play designations and such. So it is an unbelievable tool. I use it every day. I use it to go through the show. I use it to build my lineup. So Cliffy kind of has a lineup built. What do you got in there?
Yeah, I decided to go with the Boston top line stack, fade Florida. So Boston top line went with our Calgary third line as well. And then I'm using Tristan Jarry. We'll talk about Pittsburgh next, but it looks like Tristan Jarry's starting tonight. He's 6,500 on DK. Probably going to be super chalky, but 6,500 is a nice savings, and it allows me to get in our Erik Karlsson pretty easily. Like I said, I think if San Jose generates a few goals here tonight, it's largely going to be because of Erik Karlsson. So don't mind taking a chance on him. It's just about looking for a cheap defenseman. I'm going to throw in another Calgary blue liner. I'm going to put Chris Tanev in there. Now, you see the 78-point projection. It's not projecting that well because we don't have a Jarry projection because he just got confirmed. I assume Jarry's probably going to be at around 13, 14 points. So, that brings our projection up to about 91, 92 points. And, you can see the salary, ownership percentage projection, stock projection. It's how quickly you can build a lineup in the lineup builder and see, what fits, what doesn't, what they're projecting for, what you can use together. Just really, really helpful if you're playing like a single entry 3 max, something like that.
Yep, and that is the lineup that Cliffy built. And also, if you choose the weekly option, tomorrow there is a monster 444 contest with 150K to first. I would assume the other GPPs are going to be big as well. There will also be a big slate on Thursday. I think there is another decent slate on Friday and Saturday. So it'll take you through till next Monday. You'll get 5 decent, pretty big slates. And tomorrow is going to be the biggest GPP that DraftKings has ever ran outside of the World Hockey or the Fantasy Hockey World Championship. So make sure the only way to get it is click the link in the description. It'll populate the code for you. You don't have to enter anything. And we'll go from there. Let's move on to the last game of the night. The New York Islanders with a 2.8 total heading into Pittsburgh. The Penguins have a 3.2 total. Ilya Sorokin is probable. Tristan Jarry is confirmed. He is mid-price on DraftKings, like Cliffy just mentioned. Also, Matt Barzal is going to be out indefinitely. That really hurts the Islanders as he's probably their best playmaking forward. Not probably, he is. So it's going to be interesting to see what the line combinations are going to be. I think that obviously hurts Bo Horvat. That hurts the Islanders big time. I like the Pittsburgh side here. The top line's not getting much ownership. Always stacking against Sorokin. Not ideal. They played recently. The Penguins top line scored a bunch of goals there. So don't mind going back to Pittsburgh 1. On the Islanders side, it's kind of hard to say what the line combinations are going to be. But if Nelson and Palmieri are together, I have interest there. They have very good numbers together.
Yeah, Nelson and Palmieri are going to be playing together. I just saw a line combination. So they're going Lee, Horvat, Holmstrom, Parise, Nelson, Palmieri, and then, a bunch of guys. Here's the thing is that Nelson and Palmieri do have very good numbers together, but it's only with Anders Lee as the left winger. If you look at the numbers over the last 2 seasons, Nelson, Lee, Palmieri, absolutely dynamite. 4.7 expected goals for, 3.8 actual goals for, just outstanding offensive numbers at 5-on-5. Nelson and Palmieri without Anders Lee on their line. 240 minutes together, that is not a small sample. We're looking at like 25 games worth of ice time or something like that. 2.6 expected goals for, 2.4 expected goals against, under a 52% expected goal share. So they go from a 63.5% goal share to a 51.5% goal share without Anders Lee. He is a big, big part of the success that Brock Nelson has had in the NHL over the last few seasons. Lee he really does help generate a lot down low, which is, the prime scoring areas. And they're not going to get, they're just not going to get the same thing out of Zach Parise. Like, I'm sorry, they're just not. In fact, Parise and Brock Nelson in their 60 minutes together, 2.4 expected goals for, 3.2 against. They're getting caved in. I just don't think that's going to be a very good line for the Islanders. So I'm out on Parise, Nelson, Palmieri. Actually, if Anders Lee was there, I had that line written down and circled as a line I was going to play tonight of Lee, Nelson, Palmieri, Lee, Horvat, Palmieri. Either of those combinations, I was going to play them. These specific combinations, Holmstrom on the top line, Zach Parise on the second line. Is that what we're doing? I'm out. Casey DeSmith is starting. So, Tristan Jarry is starting. So I think he's a pretty reasonable upgrade over Casey DeSmith as long as he's healthy. So I'm at the very least, I'm out on the Islanders second line. The Islanders top line, you're not going to have a sample. Horvat just got there. He hasn't played a lot with Holmstrom, obviously. So you're not going to get a sample over the full line for that top line. However, Bo Horvat and Anders Lee have played a little bit together this year. 3 or 4 games. They've been a really high pace line, generating a lot of attempts for, but allowing it get a lot against as well. So if they're going to be trading chances, I don't mind a two-man of like Horvat and Lee or something like that. If Jarry's not on his game or something like that, the Pittsburgh penalty kill, no team is allowing more shots on the penalty kill than the Penguins over the last 20 games. Not Anaheim, not Arizona, not any of those teams. It's Pittsburgh. So I think losing Barzal is going to hurt the power play, obviously, but I do think there are reasons to play that Islanders top line, or at least the duo of Lee and Horvat against Pittsburgh here tonight. Maybe Jarry's not on his game. The Pittsburgh penalty kill has been terrible. There's good leverage on that Islanders line. There's going to be good leverage on that Islanders line. So I don't mind Islanders one as kind of a contrarian play here, but obviously this is about Pittsburgh. I would just go to the top line. All their problems are shooting percentage related. Since Christmas, 4.1 expected goals for, but they're shooting 6%. If they're shooting 10%, they're one of the best offensive lines in the league over the last 2 months. Like that, though, that's what we're talking about here. So I do like the top line. Sorokin does scare me. Sorokin always scares me. People are going to have to make that decision for themselves. But I do like the top line. I don't think either of the Islanders' top 2 lines are going to be particularly good defensively. It's just whether they can break through Sorokin. It's a tall task. But that Pittsburgh top line coming in as one of the best leverage spots on the entire slate, the most leverage at 11.5%. I really do like Pittsburgh one here, even if they are facing Sorokin.
Yeah, I do as well. I just, losing Barzal is going to be a brutal hit for them. Everywhere.
I mean, it's like San Jose losing Meyer, right?
Yeah. I mean, like their power play still might be okay because you don't really need. I guess like the problem for the Islanders power play now is who's going to enter the zone with the puck. It was Barzal who was the guy who get into the zone. I guess Horvat.
Yeah, because Lee's not doing it. Horvat's not doing it. Palmieri, I don't think, is going to do it. I mean, I hope Noah Dobson's sharpened his skates this morning.
Yeah. So like if they can get set up, they might be fine. But getting set up, if the puck gets cleared, could be an issue because Barzal was the one getting into the zone. So I don't know. Like I don't mind like a one-off Nelson, a one-off Lee, a one-off Horvat. But yeah, I'm on the Pittsburgh side here. Islanders are generally a bad defensive team anyway. Sorokin's just saved their ass the whole season. But yeah, I do really like going to Pittsburgh one here. That is the 6th gamer here. Coming up after us, guess what? There's nothing coming up after us because we are the only show in town today. We should talk about the little gremlins who live behind the blue line, the defensemen. Who you liking on D today?
I mean, I say him almost every show when they play. Tonight's going to be absolutely no exception because he's a Stoneman Price, Simon Benoit from Anaheim, right? Seems like it's a pretty reasonable chance the Florida Panthers generate like 40 to 50 shots in this game. Benoit for Anaheim, like he's not a good offensive defenseman or anything like that.
Not good.
He's probably just not good. but he's second in ice time on their blue line late, like over their last 5 games or whatever. He's stone min and loves to block shots. Like, it seems pretty reasonable. You could hit the DK block bonus here. So I like Benoit and Carlo actually, and Brandstrom from Ottawa, because with Sanderson out, Brandstrom's been getting more ice time. Not a great spot, obviously, for him, but 2,700 for 21, 22 minutes of ice time. I'll take that in almost any matchup for any defenseman. If you need, going up a little bit more, I'm wondering about Michael Stone for Calgary. He's getting about 15 minutes of ice time. Like, he's playable at 3,100, certainly not 4,400 earlier this season or whatever it was. Rasmus Ristolainen, I guess, is in play if they're going to use him on the power play from time to time. That's something that our buddy Mr. G mentioned in the Discord this morning, is that Rasmus Ristolainen is playing net front on the power play at times for the Flyers. So I guess if you're in that mid-price range on DraftKings, I think they're, the two obvious ones are in the early games, Forsling and Lindholm from Florida and Boston, respectively. Neil Pionk, now that Winnipeg's running 2 power play units, Neil Pionk's getting meaningful power play minutes, so I guess he's fine, but it's still not a good matchup. I think Jeff Petrie makes a nice pivot in Pittsburgh. He's like 4,300, I think, on DraftKings. Pretty reasonable price. 21, 22 minutes in a good matchup. It's just Sorokin you have to worry about. Noah Hannafin from Calgary as well. Like I said, in that game, I think it's 5-on-5 I'd focus on more than the power play. I know they split up the power play units. He is getting power play time, but Rasmus Anderson, he's been important for the power play. His power play's been important for his production, not so much for Hannafin. Now, for the expensive guys like Ekblad and McAvoy, it's kind of like Forsling and Lindholm. It's the same thing with the early games. Like, obviously, those guys are in play. Chris Letang, I think for Pittsburgh at home in that late game. Erik Karlsson, I think, is the interesting guy on this slate, because I don't think people are going to be super excited to play him without Timo Myers in the lineup. And like I said, I think if they generate anything offensively, it's going to have to be off the back of Erik Karlsson. So I think there is merit to playing Karlsson, even if he's not projecting that well for his price, because I think if San Jose does somehow go off for like 4 or 5 goals here tonight, it's probably because Karlsson's heavily involved.
Yeah. Don't have too much to add there. Goalie was interesting before Yari got confirmed. Now I think he's going to be very chalky, but anyone else you like him besides Yari?
Oh, goalie is very interesting. Do we have to pay $7,000 plus for a goalie here tonight? I say we don't. There are 3 goalies in that $6,000 range, 6,500 to 6,900 range. There's John Gibson going into Florida, Kevin Mandolese going into Boston, and then obviously Jari at home to the Islanders. Now, Jari is going to be he is going to be the highest owned goalie, and he is going to be like multitudes higher owned than Gibson or Mandolese. We just saw Kevin Mandolese have an absolutely unbelievable game in his first game for Ottawa, right? Like, they went into the Islanders and he made 46 saves. Now, going into Boston, I think, is a different beast, but Boston has had their shooting percentage issues this year, as the Islanders have at times. And if you want to counteract the 50 to 75% ownership we might see on some Florida or on Florida in totality, then I think playing John Gibson does make sense too. I think I would lean Mandolese between the two. Like, I would go Jari, Mandolese, then Gibson. But I think there's merit to playing all 3 here. If I'm paying up for a goalie a little bit more expensive, I think the one that's appealing to me is Ilya Sorokin.
Yeah, I think you can pay up for Sorokin. It's not really expensive. He's 7,600. Also, Linus Ullmark just got confirmed at 8,300. I prefer him to Bob at 8,500. I think there is legitimate shutout upside with Linus Ullmark. So if you want to pay it for a goalie, Ullmark would be the guy.
Yeah, for amongst the 8K plus goalies, it's Ullmark for me.
Yeah, and we had a question in chat. Can you guys go over a few of the chalk plays at the end for the new people? Yeah, so the chalk is pretty concentrated today. Pretty much the Florida Panthers are going to be massive chalk. It's just one of the best spots on the slate. They're going up against one of the worst defensive teams on the slate. So, yeah, pretty much the top 2 lines for the Florida Panthers are going to be massive chalk. And on the goalie side, Tristan Yari, Min Price, who's a starting goalie in the NHL, is going to be massive chalk. But as we've talked about before on the show, like on some strategy stuff, like goalie ownership doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of, who's going to get the most points, or with a min price goalie like Yari, is he going to completely destroy your lineup? And I don't think Yari's going to completely destroy your lineup. I think it will allow you to get some things in that you couldn't beforehand. And also, from the defensemen, I think the Florida Panthers defensemen are going to be pretty chalk as well.
Yeah, I think Seattle's probably going to be pretty chalky, right? Because they do have 3 cheap-ish playable lines. I don't think the Beniers line is going to be that chalky. I think the Schwartz and the Gord lines are going to be fairly chalky because they're pretty cheap and you can fit them in pretty easily with the Florida and Boston stacks. So if you want to avoid the cheap chalk, I think not playing Seattle 2 and Seattle 3 is the way to go. It would just be Beniers or not play Seattle.
Agreed there. You like metric?
Might be a little bit over-owned, but playing well for a great line in a good spot. Michael Backlund from the Calgary Flames.
I'm going to go Jared McCann from Seattle. Not ultra spicy like I normally do, but that's who I'm going with. I see my internet decided to not be great towards the end of the show here, but make sure to smash that like button on the way out. If you have any questions, make sure to hit us up on Twitter or especially in the Discord. Good luck, everybody, tonight. We'll see you back tomorrow for some big old GPPs.
Good luck tonight, everyone.